Hi, everybody, and welcome to our much delayed discussion of Jade Legacy by Fonda Lee, the third book in the Green Bone Saga trilogy. Taylor is on her way to join us, so she is joining us. It might just be a little bit late, so we are excited to see her. But with me today, I've got some lovely guests, if they could introduce themselves, starting with Jimmy.
I should have brought my Broken Binding edition, because even though I'm going to be
Mine's
hating tonight.
right there.
You both have the Broken Binding edition?
Oh, no, this isn't Broken Binding. What is this?
I don't know what that
Illumicrate?
is. Illumicrate, I guess. I have the Broken Binding ones.
Well, why
Yeah.
didn't that's lovely too.
Those are better. Those are
Broken-
a lot better than mine.
Broken Binding has the stained
This one
glass on the spine, right? Or
Oh, yeah. I know what copy that is. Yeah, the stained glass one.
If I had any kind of foresight, I probably should have brought those up here. But yeah, I'm Jimmy. I read this series like a year and a half ago, I think. And I really liked book 1, and I liked book 2, and then book 3. Well, I will be the it's always been about love and hate. And let me just say, I'm the biggest hater. I hate the way this book talks. I hate the way that it walks. I hate the way that it dresses. I hate the way that it sneak disses. If I catch flight, it's going to be direct. I'm quoting Kendrick Lamar at this point. Yeah. So that's me.
Thanks, Jimmy. What a colorful intro. Phillip, would you like to introduce yourself?
Okay. I mean, it's kind of tough to follow Jimmy there, and I have a feeling that isn't entirely true. I'll be curious to hear Jimmy's thoughts. It has also been a year for me since I read this, so if I make any mistakes, please forgive me. I tried to jog my memory today, but I've had a great time discussing this series with the three of you, actually, and has added a lot to my appreciation for it. And it's a series I'm very glad to have read. I think will be somewhere in the middle of Jimmy over there. And the two of you, because I know this is a huge favorite for the two of you, Taylor and Bookborn. But for me, it was great. I have niggles and complaints and things like that, mostly structural in nature. So we can, I guess, talk about that. But I thought there were many highs in here, many iconic moments that I thought were really well done. So mostly I had praise for it. But I might be agreeing with Jimmy here and there. Just be warned.
That's okay. We'll still like you, Phillip. And Taylor, just in time for your introduction.
I'm glad I made it. Sorry, guys, for being a little bit late there. So my name is Taylor. My booktube channel is Made Between the Pages. I've been part of the discussion for the first 2 books. Can't wait to talk about this one. It is a favorite of mine. I'm not shy about it. I think it's one of the best fantasy conclusions I've ever read for many different reasons, which we'll get into today. I'm all right, though, with talking with people who disagree. I've done that quite a few times now, actually. So I think that's what makes it fun. You can be wrong. I'll allow it. But
Taylor, if you ever want to get tacos or tequila ever again, or whatever we thought nachos was what it was, you have to agree with me. You have to.
Well,
Now
it looks
you know.
like nachos aren't happening then.
So some qualifiers before we get into this. First of all, the fact that this is happening this late is 100% my fault. And I want everyone to know that.
Yes, it entirely is your
It
fault.
actually is, though, because I forgot I was supposed to be hosting it for like a year. And then they had to email me like several times to get me to remember this. So like we're putting that out there. It's my fault. 2, that also means it's been a hot minute since any of us has read this novel, which means we may forget things. I know I will. And in fact, this is, little things, but this is a call right now to any Greenbone Saga fans listening. There are no wiki articles on
That's
the
right.
Greenbone Saga currently.
I
I would
tried.
know because I looked for them today to try to brush up, and they don't exist. So if you love this series, you should go and write wiki articles for all of us. But that being said, I have some things I want to talk about. The first one being the time skip. Significant time is skipped near the beginning of this book. Hey, don't worry, guys. I will fix that in a second. You guys take it away. How did you feel about the time jump?
Jimmy,
Which one?
You want to go?
Yeah.
Which one? I don't know.
Sounds like Jimmy and Phillip didn't like them so much.
So here's the thing. I'm not a just a full-blown hater about the time jumps. I actually like the first one. I actually was really excited about the first one. And maybe even the second one. I can't remember exactly how many there were, but at some point the time skips then began to kind of grate on me a bit because I felt like I was missing bridging scenes that would have led to maybe characters acting differently than they were. And I kind of had to just accept that that was the case. I think time jumps are a necessary evil for some stories, and they're really, really hard to do. I don't think anyone loves time skips. I don't think anyone's like, yeah, my favorite part of the story is when it skipped a bunch of time. Like, it's very rare that that's anyone's favorite part of the story, but it can be done well. And I don't think it's like it doesn't damn the book immediately for having it. And in my notes, I actually wrote, I really like this time skip. And then at the end of my notes, I did not like any of the other time skips, so I must have not really enjoyed them. And I made a lot of comparisons in the time skips to Ken Liu's series, Dandelion Dynasty, because you would time skip and then settle in. Whereas this book, it felt like I would time skip and I would not settle in, and then I would kind of skip again. And I felt like I was lurching constantly. You know, it's like getting in the car with someone's driving a Tesla for the first time and they're just constantly like this. That's how I felt.
I was just helping you with,
Thank you, Phillip.
Like a very specific imagery that I've experienced, so I appreciate it.
I thought your hip went out, Phillip. I thought that's
that's just as likely to happen. But so that is really what I was alluding to when I was talking about the structural niggles that I have with it. And I think it was a bold choice on Fondley's part. This is not something that she did with either of the first two books, with Jade City or Jade War. And this was a harder thing to pull off. And I think mostly she does. But I had this similar feelings to what Jimmy was describing with the time skips in general, because I felt like this felt very episodic to me. Mm-hmm. And in my non-spoiler review, I compared it to make like a TV series with lots of highs and then, resolutions and another high and a resolution. And that got to be a little like, whoa, okay. Like I was, and that might be just me being very traditional minded and wanting it to have a more traditional novel structure or something like that. Because I will admit, enjoy many of those iconic moments, which we're going to talk about. There are some very emotional moments, even I just pulled out the book to jog my memory. I read the last couple chapters again, and I got teary a little bit there at the end. So definitely she hit me in the right ways in terms of the emotions and all of that. But I did get a little frustrated with that constant. I felt like I was on that is a direct result of the time skips, really. And I kept wondering, and this, I would never dare to give Fondley writing advice or anything like that. But I just have to wonder, what would the series have been like? I'm not saying it would have been better or anything else, but what would it have been like if she had turned this into like 3 books?
That's how I felt too. I actually was like, man, I kind of wish that this wasn't a trilogy now. I kind of wish that it was 4 or 5 books. And I don't say that often. Like most times, it gets split or extended, and I'm like, But here, I just felt like there was a lot to do.
I would have happily read those books, based on how much I enjoyed the first 2, and I enjoyed this one too. Don't get me wrong. This is all the negative stuff I have, really. Other than this, I have so many wonderful things to say about it. But I have to agree with Jimmy to a large degree on this one.
I guess for me personally, that kind of episodic nature of it felt more like a roller coaster ride rather than a electric car newbie. In the beginning, it felt a little more smooth to me. So I enjoyed that aspect of it. And I also, I guess, logically understood why she was doing it, because some of those heavy hitting moments that do happen had to have time between them. And that book is already a doorstopper, right? So for me, structure wise, several years of growth would have had to have occurred between, I don't know if we're going full spoiler yet, so I'll stay a little broad for the moment, but between certain character deaths or certain character interactions, time must have passed. It couldn't have been the next day. So I do understand why she did it, and it didn't feel as jarring for me. So I think it's just my subjective experience of that, storytelling device wasn't as harsh as the two of you.
Mhm.
But I felt that those time jumps also allowed us to get the legacy aspect of this, because we need to
Yeah.
see the transition from what was to what will be. And we need to believe that enough time has passed for those changes to have occurred. So, I thought that the time jumps were a really smart way to get there. And I also felt like I was able to carry through the time jumps because I knew the characters so well. So even though I didn't see a specific interaction on the page that might have led to what happened after the time jump, I was able to fill in the gaps because I'm like, that makes sense for what I've seen of that character and their development and where they were when we left them last. So for me, I feel like the character work carried me through and got us to kind of that end point with that one of those big themes that she was dealing with, which is the change over time and the idea of legacy and what does it really mean. And your legacy might be different than what you kind of wanted it to be, but it is what it is, right? So for me, the time jumps played so well into that theme, they didn't really bother me. But I don't know how you felt about it.
I'm on your side, Taylor. I understand why they are. Sorry, Jimmy. I understand why they are not controversial is the wrong word, but like why they work for some people and not. Like, I think as I was researching again, like people's thoughts, good and negative, that's the one that recurred the most, in my opinion, along with something else, was like these time jumps. At first, it stressed me out because I always get a little stressed when there's a time jump because you feel like you're missing a lot. But once I settled into it, I actually quite enjoy it. In fact, it's probably one of my favorite uses of time jumps. And for one of the reasons you said, Taylor, which is the legacy of it all. Like, I really felt like you need that legacy. And the reason I would push back on it being more books is I do wonder if seeing some of those in between times would have become really repetitive. Like, part of me wonders if Fonda Lee was, because there are cyclical, that's not how you say that. Cyclical. Thank you. Cyclical things that happen in the books purposely. And I wonder how often you could read those same events, though, and have it still be interesting. I'm not saying she couldn't do it, but if you split this into 3 books, now you need to have another beginning, middle, and end arc. And I do think this book works really well, in my opinion, as a full story. So that's why I'm also kind of in favor of the time jumps. I also think it's underrated how well Fonda did the character work in those time jumps. Like, especially I noticed it with Hilo. He felt different than he was earlier, but still the same person. It felt a very realistic aging of a character like Hilo, which I found to be very impressive. And I forget, because the first time jump is like quite significant, isn't it?
Does anyone remember?
I don't remember time frames.
So I feel very opposite about Hilo.
Wasn't it like a decade? Am I making that up? Someone in the comments.
The whole thing is a span of 2 decades, I think, right?
Yeah, the whole thing is 20 years, right?
So for me, I felt like I needed to have more concrete scenes for those changes in Hilo. That was what I felt like I was missing out on. Like, I was kind of being told that he was this person now. And sure, maybe I could see it, but I felt like it was just such a large change that, like, not seeing it executed, and I don't like using this term, but I felt like a little bit of a cop-out to me, especially for a character that I cared a lot about. Maybe not cared for, because he's kind of a jerk, but like a character I'm invested in, right? Like, I would want to see that. It reminds me, like, if between Clash of Kings and, or actually we can just do this: A Storm of Swords and Feast for Crows, that George had done a 5-year gap like he had intended, and then Jamie all of a sudden was a good, what I mean? Be like, I kind of want to see that transition, but I do understand the legacy portion.
Hilo doesn't become a good guy.
Well, no, and he's not. No.
Okay,
I'm clearly, and also Jamie's not just a purely good guy either. But I'm just giving like an example of kind of like what I would have liked to have seen some sort of transition, or like, I don't know.
I think it's a useful comparison. I would compare the time jumps in this one to what you see in Realm of the Elderlings or in Long Price Quartet, for example. Those are series that handle time jumps differently because the time jumps occur between the books, not a bunch of time jumps within a single book. Yeah. So I feel like that's an easier thing to pull off too, I think. What she tries to do here is, like I said, it's bold. I'm not 100% at least for me, my experience with it was that it didn't give me a smooth experience, not as smooth as the previous 2 books, let's say. I don't know. What do you think, Jimmy?
Is there any truth to the fact I heard this somewhere, and now I'm doing that awful thing on the internet where I just regurgitated probably incorrectly, and now it becomes a thing. I had heard that she had maybe considered more books, but like COVID was happening, and she just decided that like she just wanted to get the book done before whatever was going to happen, and that might have been why there were time jumps, or why she didn't do more books.
I can actually answer this
Yes,
because
please.
we've had her on page doing. We've had her on page
Yeah.
doing. So I asked her, "Was this always going to be a trilogy?" And she said, "Yes."
Okay. So that is misinformation that I was spreading.
That's okay. That's okay. But the interesting thing is, you know, hearing you say it could have been more books. I mean, those of us even who love the books are like, give us more. And so far we have that mini novella with some slice of life stories. She's also released a newsletter recently with a slice of life story in it. So she's giving us, you know, tidbits, but I don't know if she's actually ever going to go back into the world fully, because the way that she talked about it, you know, of course, sans spoilers, so I don't know exactly what part she's talking about.
Oh, sorry, we can do full spoilers. I warned on it in my title, so if you guys want to go, like, I'll warn the chat right now.
Spoilers.
Spoilers.
Okay.
So now if you're not, if you want to read it.
All right, so I'm not sure what of the ending, you know, bombshell she's talking about, the death of Hilo, or how Ayt Mada just kind of fades off, you know, even though she would like to go out with a bang. I'm not sure what aspect she was talking about because the page 2ing was spoiler free, but she did mention that the ending did come to fruition in some ways that she had wanted. So the story did change along the way, of course, but yeah, it was going to be 3.
Now, you bring up some good things that I had written down, because there are some character endings, if we want to go to endings already. Character endings, sorry, I'm looking at mine, that were controversial. Some people love, some people disliked. And I particularly think of Hilo, Barrow, and Ayt's endings. People either wanting more punishment for them, less punishment. They felt they were unsatisfying. So I would love, that's a lot. Why don't we start with Jimmy's favorite, Barrow?
I thought the ending for Barrow was awful.
What?
This is actually what this is what set me down. This is what set me down to like a lower rating than the other 2 books for me, because I felt like she like didn't know what to do with it. Like, especially after the Great Strike. I don't know, him just like driving a taxi at the end.
Yeah.
That is the worst thing that could happen to that character. He is obscure.
Do you hate Uber drivers? What's wrong with you?
What? Did I hate Barrow? Did I hate Barrow?
No, do you hate Uber drivers? You're like, it's the worst thing that could happen to someone is they have to drive people.
That is not what I said. That is not what I said. I said it's the worst thing that could happen to Barrow.
Bookborn hates the working
that is
class.
The worst thing that could happen to Barrow.
She's going to raise your taxes, and she hates the working class. No, I'm just kidding.
That is the worst thing that could happen to Barrow, is what I said. Don't be Alan.
I think the worst thing that happened to Barrow is that he's dead. I think that
No.
He
would have kind of liked that.
Yeah, he wanted he wanted to be known, he wanted to be big, he wanted to be famous, he wanted to go out with a splash. Someone being like, your legacy is going to be nothing. Your Jade legacy is going to be nothing, Jimmy.
I'm pro Barrow. I don't know what to tell you guys. This guy was trying to topple this awful power system and these entitled people, and I'm like, you know what? I think Barrow, while he isn't, I don't like the things he's doing necessarily, I can understand it and why he feels that way. And I feel like, I guess, like, what's the moral of Barrow's story?
I'm gonna agree and disagree with Jimmy on this one.
Oh, Phillip,
yeah,
you fence sitter.
I know it's terrible. It's terribly uncomfortable sitting on the fence too, believe me. But I'm gonna do it.
Depends on the fence.
I liked where he ended up. I thought that I was totally cool with it. I actually think I love where she brings all these characters, but we'll talk about them individually. I thought they were brilliant endings. But I would have liked to have seen more of the whole anti-clan movement. And that is something that is, I feel, for the most part, I am very happy with how the themes are woven into the story. It is more a plot-driven story, but it has some really good themes. It has some really important themes that I think Fond du Lis successfully weaves in here and gets people thinking about and poses questions about. And one of them is that whole, social class thing that we talked about in previous discussions. And Barrow is kind of the poster boy for that theme in a way, isn't he? But that whole anti-clan movement, I just felt there could have been, and if just me dreaming for more books, I guess. But if it had been expanded on in a maybe a 5-book or 6-book series, it would have been interesting to see what she would have done with that. That's all I feel. So I do feel that where he ends up, though, I love the poetic sort of cosmic justice of where she brings the characters in the end. I was very happy with. I guess what I'm trying to say, really, and again, it's a product of this structure. I love where she brought things. I'm just not always satisfied with how we get there. I would have loved to see more in how we get there. And that definitely goes for Barrow and the whole anti-clan movement for me.
Longer books.
Maybe.
What about you, Taylor?
Well, I agree in the sense that by the 3rd book, I think that Barrow's perspective, as much as I hate the cockroach of a man, I do think it was necessary because we are on the side of the clans because we know them, right? And I think it could have been an extremely different and also very interesting book if we had gotten to know characters that were in Barrow's position and they were made likable. Barrow's just an awful human. But I do think that he represented a perspective that Fond du Lis wanted you to think about, right? Because we live so close to these clans. What is the ripple effect of the way that they run society, of their power structure? So I do think he represented an important point of view, but it is a testament to Fond du Lis' writing skill that I'm like, I don't care. The rebel, crush the rebels, get rid of them. Like long live the power structure.
Long live the empire.
Exactly. Like that's the vibe I had reading the book, if I self-reflect. And I think that that's a testament to the writing structure or the writing skill of Fond du Lis herself. So
yeah, ultimately don't think that this story was too concerned with tackling that piece of it. But it was introduced and it's something that I wanted to latch on to. And I just don't think that that's what the story was about.
Yeah, there's something interesting that Anita set up here about Ayt Mada, who I know we're not talking about right now, but I had actually asked Fond du Lis when I interviewed her if it was intentional that you can sense that if the story was told from the mountain's perspective, we would dislike No Peak, because from the very first book, I thought, well, if I was reading this from a different perspective, I would hate No Peak because they're not like very great people. They are doing bad things. And I recognize that. And so I think what you're saying is what's missing is you don't have necessarily that feeling of the clanless movement. Because like you said, Taylor, we don't really like anyone in the clanless movement. And so I did never get that sense. So I think that is like a decent criticism of the novel, that if you're going to have that clanless movement, and if you already created a novel where you recognize that the side you're on is only because you are seen from their perspectives, it maybe would have been interesting to have more from the clanless, even if it was a bit piece. Like you said, Taylor, like Barrow sucks so much. You're just not going to like connect, or you're not going to want to see him win. Like, even if I actually do agree with the clanless movement, like as a reader, I dislike the clans. I think they are toxic and they pull people in. And I think the best thing would be to dissolve them. Like that was what I got from the book thematically. But it is interesting that you can get that thematically and also dislike the clanless group. It's kind of like a weird dichotomy.
Well, I think she's able to make you go against what your internal morality might be, because that's just not what's on the pages. So you have this kind of war within yourself. Well, this is what I actually believe, but also not really, not in this context of this story. That's not necessarily what I'm rooting for. So that conflict is something I found very interesting. And honestly, Hilo, my reaction to him as a character, I think is a really good personification of a representation of that internal struggle that I had, because he never recovered from Jade War for me. Never,
me neither.
ever. Once he killed Nico's mom, and I was like, no, get out of here, right? So he never recovered from me. So I
never liked him to begin with, though. So it was always bad, then it got worse.
Yeah. But in this book, I wanted him to die, but I cried when he died. But I wanted that. So that internal conflict, I think, is I don't know the answer. I'm still
That's
wrestling
a
with
perfect
it, honestly.
segue. Let's talk about Hilo's ending, because similarly, Taylor, like I was so, and like no one can describe what he does in Jade War in a way that makes sense to me. Like it is just so awful. And I loved him he's a well-written character. I loved reading about him. I did not like him. But I cried. I cried at Hilo's funeral. Like I did. I cried. And that is weird because I didn't like him. I don't know. How did you guys feel, Phillip, Jimmy, about his ending?
Jimmy, you want to go first?
Yeah, I was very not really into Hilo at all in this book because, like I said, I felt like these transitions happened and I didn't quite buy them, or at least I didn't feel like I'd seen enough for it to happen. And I was kind of just going with the flow, of the book in the roller coaster. I was kind of interested in Tar's whole thing, minus the Remy stuff. I didn't really like the Remy stuff all that much. But I knew Tar would probably end up with the mercenaries. So I was kind of into that more so than even Hilo in this one. I mean, obviously Hilo is like at the heart of the story. But I didn't feel anything when he died. I was just like, okay.
How do you feel about him dying? Because people also didn't like that ending for him. Do you feel like that was a good ending, a bad ending?
I never felt like he had to really wrestle with all of the consequences of the things that he did, which is kind of anticlimactic in some ways, but also like, there's a very good chance the Zodiac killer also is dead and didn't have to face the consequences of all the people he murdered. So I guess it's not necessarily an unrealistic thing. And it's one of those injustices that, makes you question the world a little bit. But I don't necessarily have a problem with him dying or really how he died. I guess it didn't really bother me very much. Like, honestly, and I'm not trying to be like actually a hater, but like, I very much felt like I was just waiting to find the next bullet point in the story. So I just felt so detached from it at that point.
I loved it. I got emotional about it, and I also thought it was such an appropriate ending because he's a kind of a dinosaur at the point of his death in a way. He represents an old morality, and he lived that morality to its fullest. I mean, you guys are going to be shocked that I'm going to mention Beowulf here, but I'm going to mention Beowulf.
It has to happen at least once.
I got to bring it in. Beowulf is a hero who is written about by his Christian descendant, and he lives this moral code of vengeance and glory and honor and all of this. And for the Christian poet, that's a somewhat he has mixed feelings about it because the loyalty and the courage are great, but what about the vengeance and the seeking glory and all of that leads to destruction? I feel like Hilo is similar in the sense that he adheres marvelously to this code that he knows, and so for us to judge him by our own moral code is, I think, a little bit unfair, maybe. Because he does live out this code more than anyone else almost, and magnificently, to the point though where at the end when he does die, he does so in a sacrificial manner. He does so for the clan. He does so for the nation. He is willing to put himself aside in that moment, and what he does for the future. He knowing that Nico and the nephew of Ayt Mada, who's the new ruler of the Mountain Clan, he understands where things are going, and he's willing to take the bullet literally in order for that to allow that to happen. So I thought his ending was just brilliant, actually, and so appropriate and so true to the themes that Fondly was exploring here about family and loyalty and nation. And Hilo is somebody who lived for his clan, and everything he did for his clan, and he did for bigger things than himself. It was never I never felt he was just so egocentric. This is me, that wasn't him. If he had been just a bully and an egocentric person, then I wouldn't have liked him at all. But he lives his morality to the fullest.
Well said.
Well, this hadn't occurred to me before you were speaking, Phillip, but just thinking as like a parallel or a foil, how his grandfather went, because he was a dinosaur when he went.
Same thing.
Yeah, well, we're on the same track, but it's very different, right? How they both decided to end their life. So I think some people could see it as, you know, the sacrificial aspect might be a cheaper way to make us kind of forgive him. But I don't think that's what Fond du Lis was doing. I think there were a lot more themes involved in that. And yeah, I guess I don't really have more extra thoughts besides what I said, that I'm conflicted because I did not expect to cry, and I did. So.
Yeah.
How many bad phone calls can Hilo get in this stupid book, though? For real, like, honest to God, just unplug the phone. Just unplug the phone, and everything's better.
The events
Ignorance
don't
is bliss.
happen.
Bro, he got so many bad phone calls. It was insane. Every time he picked up the phone, bad news.
We did discuss this while Jimmy rants. We discussed at the beginning. Can I say something about Hilo real quick? I was thinking something different about his grandfather, which was like, I don't think Hilo ever wanted to become his grandfather. And so in some ways, dying before that could happen maybe was a better ending for him than something else, which was something I was thinking about today. But I also thought a lot about, you know, Hilo thought Lan would be the one to survive. Hilo's the hothead and Lan isn't. So it was interesting to see how Hilo changed over it. And like you said, he lived his clan loyalty to the very end, even if that shifted what that meant. So his arc was just so satisfying for me. I just made me appreciate him as a character. Yeah. The next person. Oh, you got
just
something,
one
Jimmy?
last thing to add. I think he literally says in that moment when Shay is talking to him, something to the effect, I'm totally going to garble it, but something to the effect that she's like obviously despondent that he is dying, and he's like, it's okay. And you know, we did it. Essentially, is it we survived this. It's the clan. It's about the clan. It's not about me, right? At this point, is what he says to her in that moment. So sorry, but yeah.
Oh no, I'm glad. I just thought we were moving on. Anyone else have any Hilo thoughts?
I'm sure it'll come up later because it's so
I'm sure it
integral.
will.
But right now, no.
What about Ayt's ending, and also Shay's relationship with her, and how that developed? What do you guys think about that?
I love Ayt Mada. I love her so much.
Yeah, Ayt Mada is definitely one of the bright points of the series for me, and also like everything with what we thought was her death scene in the Great Strike was pretty epic. Part of me almost wishes she would have died there. I felt like I would love to see how you guys, because again, it has been a bit since I read this, so I don't want to. This is the internet, so I should just say very loud, incorrect things. But I am remembering feeling like there was a lot of, I don't even want to say fake out deaths. I could say plot armor, since Bookborn just put out a video about plot armor. But I do remember Ayt Mada and the Great Strike. I think the Great Strike's phenomenal. It's actually probably my favorite scene in the series, which is ironic because this is my least favorite book in the series. But I just remember actually having kind of a visceral reaction to Ayt Mada in that scene. And then she ends up surviving, right? And then what happens after that with her? I'm trying to remember.
Well, she ultimately tries to orchestrate the assassination of the young generation, along with Hilo and Shay.
Yeah.
And the what are they called? The monk people. The
the people that, because she makes them pretend they're those because they're the people who, like, you can't do violence in front of.
Yeah,
the assassins, but then they made them assassins, right?
Yeah, so they took out the real monks and they put the assassins in their place. They had the guns ready to shoot everybody down. Hilo was the one who figured out what was going on and essentially took the bullet, saving the life of both his nephew Nico and Ayt Mada's nephew, whose name I keep forgetting. And then afterwards, Jimmy, what happens is her own clan, because her nephew is the leader. It was her attempt to take back power because she had been essentially put aside there. So it's her own clan that imprisons her, takes away her Jade. You know, she goes through the whole Jade withdrawal and everything. And she's visited a few months later by Andon. And basically she's by Nico's decision is to exile her. And she's going to live clanless, Jadeless, and just kind of wither away like an old lady.
Yeah, I recall this now.
Yeah.
Did you guys think she was dead in the Great Strike?
For a moment.
I was unsure. Once she jumped out the window, I'm like, oh, she's alive. Like, there's no way.
It's a fantasy book. It's a fantasy book.
Alive. But the other
Yeah.
thing is the other fake out death that people have a problem with. I just want to put on the record that I knew immediately they weren't dead because Fond du Lis does set up why they don't die earlier in the novel. And that's Hilo and Shay's husband, whose name left me. Like at midpoint of the book or
Woon
something.
Puppy?
Woo.
Woon?
Yeah.
She sets up how they survive. And when it happened, I thought, oh, that's why she set that up. So I just want to say, plot armor, Jimmy. She sets it up.
What can I say?
Yeah.
But I thought
think
that was
there's
a.
also. I'm sorry. Just
No,
to add for context, I think there's also one more scene between when she gets her throat slit and jumps out the window. She meets Shay at the temple where they've been meeting throughout the series. But what I don't remember about the scene and why I wanted to bring it up is what does she offer Shay in that moment again? What was the actual?
I think it was a story of
Shay
Audible.
understands that she needs Ayt Mada in order to save the nation at that point.
Right.
No one else is capable of, and so she has Andon basically bring her, heal her
And save her. Yeah.
and save her. Yeah. Because
So it was Shay that saved her. Now
we haven't talked about it yet, but there are these big forces outside. There's like a Cold War going on, and Kikon is in the middle of this, and they're bigger forces are trying to manipulate them and all of that. So Shay understands that Ayt Mada is the strong leader they need in that moment,
Yeah.
And
I think her
relationship
end's
is
pretty
one of my
good.
favorite parts of the novel. I don't know. I love how they are both navigating things and their enemies, but also recognize that they're both fighting the same injustices. I don't know. It's just a very fascinating relationship.
It is. I mean, they both had the chance to kill each other one-on-one so many times, but the only time they actually try to kill each other is a clean blade, right? Outside of that, when they meet, they don't.
Such a good
even
scene.
though they could. Yeah, it's fantastic.
That's in
I
Jade
think
War.
they're amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
War. Yeah. So I love her as a character. I don't want to get to know her. I think she would try to murder me as soon as I met her, but I do. I love her as a character, and I agree that her strength is what Kikon needs at that time, and Shay realizes it, right? So yeah, she's a complicated character, and what I wouldn't give to see from her perspective, honestly. But
I want all 3 books from her perspective.
Yeah,
because probably from her perspective, it's just if No Peak Clan wasn't so big on themselves, they would see that the vision I have would make this a better place. Like we would be happier, but they just can't let go of their pride and their clan like that. And she might be right. Honestly, she might be right. She could be. I mean, Jade Legacy, she's a little less right. But it's some of the things she does at the beginning, even though she does it sneakily, I don't necessarily know if she had won. I'm not sure it would have been terrible. It would have been probably better than the infighting that happened with a lot of collateral damage. I'm not on her side. This is making it sound like I'm on her side. I'm just saying the perspective from her angle, I think it would be very easy to see her choices is all.
I think that's an interesting exercise, though, because both her and Hilo are brutal, but in my mind, maybe I'm incorrect in this, but Hilo would stick to Aisho more than she would. Like even in the end, she's willing to impersonate priests, right?
So no.
True.
Yeah.
I do think that with No Peak existing, we were able to keep some of the good parts of tradition, whereas she might have just kept the things that serve her and dropped everything else and lost a good portion of what the tradition of being in a clan was like, even the good parts of it. There are few and far between good points, but there are some good points. So I do think that is a difference between the two of them.
She's also, though, a dinosaur. Like I love the moment at the end when Andon is telling her fate, and she says, "Geez, I never thought I'd miss Hilo," because he would have given her a death, right? He would have given her a martyr's death, and they're sending her away to just go with her, which I think is such a brilliant ending for her character.
Perfect.
So I think that she too is a relic of the past, and you can see that this new generation, people like Andon, who all through this series has been struggling with breaking out of the box, right? In so many ways, like wanting to be a doctor instead of a warrior, right? Being queer in a world where it's not universally accepted. So Andon is a great character who all along has been, I think, foreshadowing the future in many ways. And he's the first clan member to ever be elected as in an important political position. at the end of it all too. But you can see the future in Nico and in the now the Mountain Clan is all fragmented and everything, and the other young fellow is going to try to make a go of it, but he understands, No Peak is basically ascended to the top here in this struggle, and and it looks like it's going to be a gentler kind of leadership though in for the future. But I think Fontaine wisely just ends it on that. We don't know what happens, but
yeah, and I love how you said, because I do love that moment when Ayt says, "I miss Hilo," because it does a really good job of these generation differences. Like throughout the whole thing, it's about the generation gaps and how things change over time. It's such a theme. And so just seeing the different generations and how they're acting to the clan loyalty, I don't know. It's one of my favorite themes of the novel. That is very satisfying.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting to see the younger generation interact with the older one, even within family ties. Like, I don't know if it's Jaya or Yaya, Hilo's daughter. She's a carbon copy of him, but in a female form, and he doesn't know what to do with her. And I love it. She gives him such a taste of his own medicine. I'm like, ooh, it's great. And Nico also kind of following along with Shay, going outside of Kekon, using his Jade ability for another country. People don't really like that. It's maybe not the best choice for him, but it is interesting. He does end up coming back to the clan after doing that.
Just like Shay. You can't escape it.
Yeah.
I really like all the foreign stuff in this one, more so than Jade War, I think. I actually, I remember that being specifically something I thought was improved from Jade War to Jade Legacy.
That's a good point.
I agree with you on that, Jimmy. Jade War was a little tough for me sometimes.
It's more ponderous, whereas Jade Legacy is like, these are the things that are happening and they have effects in my memory, at least. Whereas Jade War is a little more ponderous about, let's make these connections. Now the connections have been made in Jade Legacy and the pieces are kind of set and now things are moving. I
also just thought there was a little bit more like detail to it rather than it just kind of being like a set piece, like a different place. And I felt like the time spent outside of Kekon actually like paid off. Like it felt like it mattered. Whereas Jade Ward, I think it was a little bit hard to see the plan from the get-go. It was kind of like, how is this going to tie back? But I even just thought in general, the details of the foreign places were more interesting.
I think Jimmy's right. And I think that's an important part of how this book explores a changing world, a globalized world. We're getting, Kekon is never going to be the same. This new generation is changing. And a lot of that has to do with the increasing connections to other parts of the world. And you get some very interesting, like I thought Tar's story as he's exiled and ends up being this long game assassination thing that they had that was being planned. I think it was Hilo was behind it, right? Sending Tar over there. He wasn't just wasting away. He infiltrated that gang and everything with the intention of eventually assassinating that dude, right? I thought that was really kind of a cool demise for Tar as well, because he gets to go out with his honor intact, I guess you could say, having overstepped earlier, having gone too far, because there are moral boundaries even within this culture of violence that Tar clearly, and that's a cool thing that gets explored in his character as well. You've got a dude here with some serious PTSD, and he acts out in utter rage, and what do you do with that warrior who's gone out of control, in a culture like this, where you're going to have that happen because of the violence inherent in the system, right? Quoting Monty Python there a little bit, yeah.
Well, that's a really good. That added more significance to his role for me. Maybe it's just because it's been a long time, and I'm so focused in my memory. The main characters are what stuck the most, but I kind of forgot about that storyline for a hot minute there, but now it's coming back to me and how he got to go out the way that he wanted to go out. And well, on that note though, being able to go out the way you want to go out, let me just say justice for Wen. Okay. The way that she was treated after almost dying in the beginning of this book, I really struggled with that personally.
With the way Hilo treated her, you mean?
Yes, the way Hilo treated her, yes.
That was next on my list, Taylor. Look at you, just perfectly.
Well, let me pass it to you then, since it was next on your list. Maybe start us off with your thoughts on it, and then we can build off of it. But I say justice for her. That's right.
Well, I hated it and I loved it. I loved it because it would have been so easy for Fonda not to have any consequences of what they did. And the consequences are intense. She has, she was without air for a long time and her brain is showing it. Like she has to like deal with this, right? And then Hilo, yeah, it sucked. It sucked because I love Wen so much. But like, I liked that Fonda explored this really difficult thing because I don't actually know if Hilo would have been very understanding about it. Like Phillip said, he has a very rigid sense of justice and honor, and Wen broke it, and Shay, right? Wen and Shay broke his trust. And I don't think there's anything worse for Hilo. And it was so, like, I didn't like it. It was so difficult for me to read those scenes. But like, I just like it when there's consequences. And Fonda said, like, I'm not going to shy away from the consequence of this thing that happened. So
yeah, it's definitely consequences. Definitely.
You didn't like the consequences, Jimmy, clearly by your face?
No, I did. No, I did.
Okay.
I was just saying they are drastic. No.
Yeah.
No, I actually thought the Wen and Hilo attempt at reconciliation was very important to the story. And is why I think, like, especially with the time jump at the beginning, like I said, I enjoyed that one. And I think a lot of it actually tied around Hilo and Wen for the most part. No, I liked it. I thought it was really good.
I love Wen's character, and she has just such beautiful strength, and in a way that you would never have expected in Jade City, to see this character be the glue that keeps this family together in some ways. I really admire her whole arc, and I'm glad that she and Hilo were able to find their way back, but it couldn't have happened easily. And I thought it was convincing the way it develops. So I did love that part of this. I thought that was great writing, actually.
Yeah, when it comes to Hilo's reaction, it wasn't surprising, but I think what bothers me is you were talking about Tar being able to do what he needed to do, and Hilo respected that he needed to do that. Didn't have any of that kind of respect for his partner in life, that this is something that she needed to do. He didn't even try to see that. So from my perspective, I'm a Hilo hater, I guess. So maybe that made it worse for me. But I do think it was realistic. I just do wish that maybe other characters had shown her a little bit more support in that time of struggle, because that would have been within the scope of the other characters to do that. So just seeing her be so alone, I guess what was so heartbreaking to me.
And her being a stone eye. Do I have that? Is that the right term? Yeah. I mean, that's a big part of her character too, as sort of somehow this outsider who wasn't supposed to ever actually be an important part of the clan because she's a stone eye, ends up being such an important character, right? And that, of course, it gets passed on to Rue, which is a really tragic part of this. That scene, I can't forget Rue's death. That was visceral, I felt, and so tragic. And maybe that's what, in a way, also made me feel for Hilo a little bit too, was what he had to go through as a father, losing his son that way. That was just awful. Yeah. And that's
Barrow.
Yeah. I don't know how you guys felt about that, but I felt that was a really just powerful part of this story.
Worst part of the book, probably.
Yeah. Worst as in hardest to read, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear Jimmy's thoughts, since you were so stoic at the end with everything else. Did this ending of a character do anything for you?
I thought it was good. Like, Ayt Mada's ending is also good, but like I didn't get very emotional in this book, I guess, is the big thing that I took away. And like, also, let's be fair, like expectations, like we're not immune, we're all humans, right? So when I'm going into Jade Legacy, I'm being told that I'm gonna, be thriving on the ground and vomiting and everything else. Every bodily fluid will be leaking out of me, and it's the best fantasy book of the last 20 years. And so, like, it had a lot of expectations put upon it for me, and that's super unfair. But that is also just how it ended up being. So just the emotion, none of the emotional punches I think landed that much. I do remember, I think it was it when Rue died to bring Nico back? Is that right, or am I misremembering?
Well, he was killed in that bar.
Nico comes back because Rue dies.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I at some point I did not like that, but also did like that. That was probably the time where I felt like a little bit of something. And then when Hilo passed, I guess like it's like a passing of a pretty legendary character in the series, and I like the series. So I guess that probably had like a little bit of it registered with me, but like at no point was I like, oh my, that never really happened. And I feel like the biggest downer of all time for that.
You shouldn't. I get your expectation thing. I hadn't heard. I try to go in with no expectations to books, so I hadn't read anything about it or seen anything. I do think that would have affected me. People were like, "You're going to get so emotional."
Well, I didn't read it
think
when it
that
came
makes
out.
it less emotional.
So I just being in the sphere and talking to people like,
Oh no, I know.
I read it so far after that like there was no chance of me being isolated, I guess.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I'm not blaming you. I wasn't trying to, but I'm saying like I totally get that because that's happened to me. Mm-hmm. If I'm told I'm going to be crying, throwing up, I'm probably going to be like, no, I'm not, and then it's gonna affect me too.
Yeah,
I do think the Stone Eye thing is super interesting with Hilo because Hilo is the most clan, and then he marries a Stone Eye, which I think is like such an interesting already thing for their relationship, and he defends her. And then, like you said, she does this betrayal, and Rue being the Stone Eye, and I don't know, it's such an interesting theme about clan, and especially with Hilo, since he willingly does it. You wouldn't think Hilo as a character would be the one to go marry and have children with a Stone Eye, like just with how important Jade is to him. And I always thought that was a very interesting part of their relationship and character.
It's also
go ahead, Phillip.
I'll just real quick. I'll just say it's interesting how, as a father, too, he continually is defeated in terms of what he wants. Rue is born a Stone Eye, and bless Hilo, he accepts him wholeheartedly. He never, I felt like he never made him feel like less because, oh, you're a Stone Eye. So there are facets to his character that are actually, you might surprise people given how rigid and ruthless.
Well, and he was the one Andon always said was most supportive of him.
Yes.
In his queerness as well, which I always thought was such an interesting character trait for Hilo.
Yeah, he didn't make a big deal of it. He accepted Andon for who he was in those terms. But he didn't want to accept Andon not being what he wanted him to be, which was a warrior, right? A greenbone warrior. Andon, that wasn't what he wanted to be. So there was that rift as well. And it happens again with his own kids, with all of them, with Nico and Jaya, as you said earlier, who's going to control her because she's the most like him. So, yeah. But sorry, Taylor, what were you going to say?
Along the similar lines, also what Bookworm brought up was part of it. We're just on the same track of mind, I think, the two of us. But we had brought up in earlier discussions I said earlier that, I think it was in the Jade War discussion, that him accepting Andon for his queerness is based solely on his proximity to him. If Andon had been someone else, not within his clan protected space or people he considered important to him, he would have condemned the queerness as much as the next person. I fully believe that. I think it's because it's people that he cares about that it opens his eyes to being able to change, right? So because he loved a Stone Eyes are okay. But if he didn't, Stone Eyes, absolutely not. Like, I firmly believe that about his character. And that was consistent all the way through. One of the amazing things about his character development is that doesn't change. I personally believe that it's that the people he cares about are different that allows him to change.
It's an interesting read on it.
That's just kind of always how I viewed it. Because I thought, well, what if someone from the mountain was a Stone Eye and gotten an important role? Would he have accepted that? Probably not. He would have used that as ammunition against Ayt Mada. Look what she's doing, adding Stone Eyes to her.
But how true is that for all of us? Like, I think sometimes it can really change your perspective when you actually know someone from a particular group. And then you just shed those prejudices that you might have had, even unconscious ones. having known a person who is from a particular group, you see the humanity in them, and that really does change you, I think. And I have to agree with you, Taylor. I think that probably Hilo is affected by those relationships in a way that actually makes him grow, despite him being so ruthless and rigid in so many ways. Yeah, and I find that beautiful, actually.
Yeah,
I find
it's realistic.
Yeah,
it's realistic. So, but that kind of does flow into what we were talking about before. I feel like we left it behind, but the global aspect of this, because you have to change, right? For the global part, you can't remain the same. So, yeah. I'm trying to think of the exact meetings. Like, I know the main plot points of what happened in the global scale, but I don't remember particular points at this point. I don't know if you guys do.
It's been a bit.
Yeah.
We liked it. The clan changed at the end.
Well, what we did, we did a time skip for this third chat. That's what we did. We
I just looked. I read it in 2022. So yeah, it's been a hot.
Yeah, I mean, we're leaving a lot of stuff that happened in Hispania. So stuff going on over there with the the pillar of South Trap. Dauk, was that his name?
Yeah.
And his son Corey, and the one that Andon has the relationship with, but ultimately kind of ends badly.
Playboy.
Yeah. Although Andon does get a great ending, I thought, just to go off.
I don't agree.
What?
And I like Andon.
I thought he did.
I thought he did well.
Get him, Bookborn. Get him.
He gets a much better, healthier relationship. He ends up being a doctor and a successful politician who's there to make change, positive change. What was wrong with his ending?
Yeah, what was wrong with that, Bookborn?
Did you not like it either, Jimmy?
I don't have an opinion.
Okay.
I'm sitting on the fence on this one.
I didn't dislike it. Let me explain. Kyle from Read by Kyle helped me come to terms when I was reading it with this ending. It's just that you know nothing about his partner. Like, his partner is just like so uninvested in his family, which I understand is probably great for Andon, but it was really hard for me to read because Andon was, if not when, Andon was my favorite character. And I just wanted to I wanted to see him being happier. I don't know. It just was like, I wanted maybe his boyfriend to be a little bit more involved in terms of like his family. Like, I just felt like we never got to see that relationship really like develop, even though we were told they were happy. I guess I just wanted to see it. I just wanted to see it so much more. And so like, I hated that it just kind of felt like a random person. Although in context of the story, I understand that's what Andon needed, was to be separate from the clan. Like, I get that. I didn't want him to be with Corey, but like, I wanted something in between the two maybe. And so that was a little hard for me at the end of the novel. I just remember feeling a little bummed, but Andon's happy. So like, that's good.
I can agree with you to the extent that I would have liked more of the perspective of, and I'm sorry, I forget what they're called, but the ethnic group that's actually native to Kikon. Their cook, Kianla, is one of them as well, I believe. I would have loved more of her perspective on all of this. You know, she's just kind of there all the time, like a piece of furniture or something. You know, occasionally we get an indication of how she's feeling about all this. She's very loyal to the family. We can see that. But I think Andon's partner is also from, forgive me for forgetting what they're called, but they're the reason that anyone has any tolerance for Jade at all, right? Because people who are kind of mixed with them that actually can use Jade. Do I have that right? Am I remembering that correctly?
I believe so.
They're where Stone Eye comes from, right? Because they can actually handle it, which is why they're forced to do the mining.
Yeah. Yes. So this is one of these, again, maybe this goes back to where we started with, the underrepresentation of the clanless movement and, the minority perspective here. Maybe we could have had more of that somehow or other, but it is what it is. And I don't think that's what she was necessarily focusing on for this trilogy. We really were focusing on the calls, and their journey and their characters. So, but I thought, it would have been interesting to get more of that perspective, and it could have happened through Andon's partner, whose name I can't remember, or Kianla, whose name somehow I do remember.
I agree
Yeah,
with you. I remember thinking that in this when I was reading, like,
Uh-huh.
wow, this could be such an interesting dynamic. But again, where was it going to fit into the story when it's not the focus? You would really, if she was going to do that, she would have to take a lot of time
Yeah.
and build that up. So, but I agree, that would have been a great addition to have that in there. We haven't talked about Shay yet, though. I mean, she's
Ooh.
so big in Jade War. I remember she was like half of the live last time we talked about her. So she's a really interesting arc. Well, dear God. She's kind of on the side in this one because I feel like Jade War was her book. But
Yeah.
how do you guys feel about where she ends up, being the weatherman and then having a family and being with Woon in the end? Like, what did you guys think of her?
Yeah. She does break up his marriage, or he and
Yeah.
she break up that marriage, which was,
Mhm.
she's not a saint or an angel, but she's somebody I always feel like I can get behind. And I feel like her becoming sort of the senior member in a way of the family remaining here and sort of guiding the younger people. I like that. I like Shay's eventual role here because she becomes less and less of a warrior and more of a thinker. And, that's a role that she really grows into beautifully. And I'm glad that she ultimately ends up happy in a good relationship. It's just too bad that she had to hurt someone else to get there,
I kind of like her in the weatherman role. I think it makes sense. I did feel like she was kind of relegated to the side though in this book, which after Jade War, I was very invested in her. And then I felt like I didn't get enough. I mean, I feel like that's kind of the reoccurring thing for me is I always wanted more out of almost everything that I got. But definitely Shay, I would say, is at the top of the list.
For what you want more of.
Yeah. Yeah. I would have just liked to seen more. But the weatherman ending for her, I think, is pretty appropriate. Weather woman, whatever.
Weather individual.
Yes, there you go.
Yeah, I mean, she had a chance not to break up that family to be with Woon, but she was selfish and then decided later to act on that. So, I think she
Okay, that's what I was remembering, right? Because didn't he try to start a relationship with her? Yeah, okay. I was like, am I remembering that wrong? Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, no, she's at 100% in the wrong when it comes to that situation. Like, there's no question. Which Fonda always does that. She'll make you fall in love with the character, and then they do something morally reprehensible, and you're like, "Come on now." I still like you, but come on now.
That's what she had to do to her previous boyfriend.
Yeah.
Well, that's true.
Murder him.
Yeah.
Just casual. Yeah.
That was a cool moment too, by the way. I mean, that was powerful, that scene.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was in Jade War, though, right? When she kills her.
Yeah. Her out of the clan regular.
Yeah.
regular guy. I mean, I feel like that was just a representation of how far she had been brought back into the clan at that point, though. Like, there's no going back at that point if you're willing to do that. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think Shay, that's a lot with her character. I love Shay, to be clear. She's great. But so she kills that person, her boyfriend, and that's, like you said, a great representation of she didn't want to be a part of the clan and she got dragged so far back. But even in some ways, I think her doing that, breaking up the marriage, I don't know, I saw it not as bad. Don't kill me. But I saw parallels with her grandfather. Like, he just kind of took what he wanted when he wanted it. And I felt like there was a little bit of like parallel there where Shay was, not thinking of anyone's feelings except her own.
As the entitled ruling class usually does.
Yes. And the cycle continues.
Barrow could have changed the world.
And she wasn't abusing people like her grandfather. So I'm not trying to say that was the same. But I did see similarities there where, like, you had your chance and then you waited and then decided to break up this marriage and kind of do what you want because of your position of power. Which was just like very interesting. I love how, like you said, Taylor, Fonda's really good at making some very complex characters that you still kind of root for, even though you recognize they are doing very bad things. Like, if people in your life were doing these things, you probably would not keep them in your life.
I got a lot of things to tell you guys. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, Jimmy, you can tell us after and we'll decide whether or not to have you back.
The plethora of girlfriends you've murdered in the past.
Yes.
Well, talking about this is reminding me how much I love the series, though, because I haven't thought about
Me
it
too.
since like our
I
Jade
just
Ward.
keep thinking about them phone calls. Just how many phone calls could there
Okay,
be?
Jen, tell me the
Don't
phone.
answer, Hilo.
Rank the phone calls, Jimmy, from most important to least important. Should have taken out.
No, because I can't remember all of them. I just whatever you were talking about, like it might have been repetitious, and I was just thinking in my head like ring, 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 ring. Bad news.
Well, but
bad
that's
news.
what I'm saying. Like you already felt like it was repetitive. So I'm just
Yeah.
saying, with 3 more books, even though I completely understand the character development you wanted to see, I wonder if she recognized that plot points would become repetitive. Now, there's
Well-
maybe a way to not do that, but
Yeah, well, I think a lot of that gets wrapped up in the storytelling aspects of it, though, and that's like kind of like the talent of stretching things out. So this is something that I've actually come to the realization of recently because I was reading recaps from one of my favorite author, and I would say, "Oh, books should have recaps. Books should have recaps." Well, when it turns out when you recap your book, you start to realize that there's a lot of repetition in these books that you're reading, and you don't realize it
which
because
book
they're.
was it?
It was Tad Williams' Last King of Osnar series, and it was like they were captured and then they escaped. They were captured and then they escaped, and then they were captured. And it's like when you boil it down like that, that seems real bad. But when you read it, you don't feel that because of the storytelling and that aspect of it, and the immersion. So, like, I actually think that it gives you more opportunity if you stretch these things out to kind of do with one hand and do something else with the other. Right. And then
you could even say that the phone calls were a shortcut that were necessitated by everything being shoved into this one book. Yeah.
That's kind of what I felt. And by the way, this is not a Tad Williams exclusive thing. I started thinking about all the series that I've read. You know how many people get captured in fantasy books? It's like the number one instigation to get characters somewhere else or introduced to someone else. I mean, it is actually astounding when I started thinking about it. Like,
Jimmy, you've never been captured before?
No. They can't find chains to fit these guns. Are you kidding? But I'm just saying, like, and then I started realizing this, and I'm like, wow, that is the storytelling aspect though, of like kind of like blinding you to these things that are really just plot points at the end of the day.
It's kind of like Eye of the World. It's really just running from one end to the next.
Yeah, old Bobby didn't do a great job of masking those, but I still liked it. I thought that was
I did too.
fun part. Yeah, which is ironic because I don't like Wheel of Time, but I love those parts. I like books more.
I like the ends.
Yeah, I like ends. Ends are fun. Just 2 friends playing musical instruments trying to make ends meet to get down the road. You know.
Listen, I love a tavern scene. You can't make me hate those. So tavern scenes, market scenes, I eat them up.
Let them
You have
cook.
the Twice Lucky in the Green Bone Saga.
Yeah.
End, right?
That's a good tavern scene. Some good tavern scenes in the Twice
Mhm.
Lucky. I love how she keeps revisiting the Twice Lucky too.
Yeah.
It's the last point, right?
Yeah, even at the ending.
Well, it's the starting point too.
Yep.
The starting points. I love the starting point of this series. I think about it a lot, actually. I really enjoyed it.
Someone, because Barrow isn't in the final chapter, right? His taxi cab thing happens the chapter before, or is it in the last
I
chapter?
think it's the last.
I think it's the last, because then he says, I think it's Andon, right?
I read this morning as the embarrassing thing.
He drops Andon off, right?
Yeah. So I do love the bookends of that as well.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
How we open and close and what's changed between there is very satisfying. Another thing you couldn't do if Barrow died, like a lot of people wanted.
I'm glad he didn't die. I really am.
Yeah, because now he's doing the worst job in the world of driving people around. You heard it here first from Bookborn. Ubers? Ew.
Just having
there. Ew, who would ever want to be a driver? I spend 90% of my time in the car driving people, but yeah, who would ever want to do that? Ever.
Well, then I have a question. One last question, then, at least for you guys, which is we've all talked about like wanting more in some capacity, right? So if you guys could pick one short story, like which character or what plot line would that short story follow that would make you happy? Like, what do you want to see more of in that way?
I can answer this quick.
Yeah.
I would love something 80 years after the end of Jade Legacy. Doesn't even have to be someone I know. I want to know the state of things 80 to 100 years when there has been a couple generations shift over. some little mini drama and a novella of what is going on.
I think I would have liked to seen maybe a little bit more of what Tar was doing when he was like off page. I think that could be interesting because that's one of the points I really liked in this story. So that would probably be my pick. I think.
Yeah, there's a problem with my pick that maybe it's just better to be open-ended. Sometimes an open-ended story is the best kind.
I love open endings. I love them.
Yeah, because then you don't. If you get too many answers, it's too many answers. You know.
I think Jimmy gave the coolest answer, actually. I was thinking of something else, but I like Jimmy's answer better. But I was going to say to revisit Nico and Jaya, you know, not necessarily as far ahead as they were describing Bookborn, but, you know, in a decade or something. And seeing, I don't know, maybe that would be boring if everything is going well, I guess.
What about the clan list then? What about something from the clan list during the 3 novels at any period, but a different person, not Barrow as a central person?
I want Kianla's take on all of this. That's what I want.
Just the cook that's seen it all happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of the perspective I actually wanted. I wanted someone in the call house, some kind of servant or something, to see from the outside what this looked like.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point though. Like, and that's something that I kind of wanted, and I wanted a little bit more from like the working class and like the everyday person, and those characters do come in and out of the story, but I felt like Barrow was like the mainstay for that. And then if that's what I have to hold on to for that, because like I wanted the clans to all them to die. Like I wanted this to be toppled essentially. So I think that's like one of the things that feels kind of disappointing, I guess, to someone like me who didn't end up loving Legacy as much. But like I think Fonda Lee has like a lot of talent, and I don't think that the ending is necessarily bad or anything. It's more like the way we went about it or whatever. But you know, points in my favor. I still recommend the series to people who I think that it will fit. My best friend actually read it, and he's not a huge reader. Loved it. I mean, he's like, dude, this is amazing. Like he's like, how is this not on TV? This would be a phenomenal television show. He was all for No Peak. He loved Hilo the whole way through. You know, it's red flags everywhere. But he loved the series. So I mean, I still recommend it to people, even though I didn't necessarily love Legacy. You know, it definitely works for a whole lot of people.
You know, Jimmy, though, I just want to say I did agree with you. My preferred ending would have been no clans as well. So even though I really like the ending she wrote, I agree with you that best for everybody would be. That's what my hope 100 years down, there's just none. You know what I mean? Eventually it just dies out.
I'm surprised by myself, though, that I don't really want that. And I don't know why I don't want that. but I don't. Maybe it's the part of me that wants to keep the tradition. I like the traditional feel of the tradition existing with the new. Is something, you know, where I live, that's everywhere. So I kind of like that dichotomy. So maybe for me, the clan, even though it is a culture of violence and the world probably would be better without it, I like the representation of tradition that they are. So I kind of would be sad to see that go, I feel.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I was laughing at Jimmy's comment there in the comments.
Absolutely eviscerated Alan.
Anyone have any last thoughts about Jade Legacy? Are you guys going to read Fonda Lee's new works as they come out?
I was about to ask, do we know when and if that's coming out?
Well, I know of a book she's doing with Shannon Lee, which is the daughter of Bruce Lee, I believe.
Interesting.
It's a YA. I actually am going to host one of the release events at a Barnes & Noble near me.
Cool.
That's like not super official. I guess I shouldn't have said it out loud, but I did get asked to moderate it. So I think it is
announcement. Heard it here first.
Like, it may not happen, but I was looking at that. And it seems really interesting. That's a combined effort. And then she has a sci-fi, I think, coming out.
Yeah, I thought I remember hearing something about sci-fi.
Yeah, she has a sci-fi. So I think it's very interesting. Both are going to be pretty removed, I think, from the Greenbone saga, which is kind of exciting. I like when an author kind of makes a left turn after something I really like. I think that's always positive.
Well, I feel like even she released, what was it? The novella. I read it.
The Settlers of Janloon?
No.
I read it. Untethered Sky with the birds.
There we go. Untethered Sky, right? So she's already released that, which is way different, right? And it definitely seems like she's stretching different muscles. Like that's a very
Did you guys
different.
all read Untethered Sky?
I have not read it. I have it, but I haven't read it.
Did you like it, Taylor?
I liked it. I liked it a lot, actually. I ended up giving it a 4, I think, was
Me too.
my star rating for it. Because there were parts that I really liked about it. And she really, this isn't giving anything away. Basically, it's giant bird companions. But she definitely took like, okay, if this was the real world, no magical tethers to each other, what would this really look like? And it's such an interesting exploration on that. So I think she's, like I said, stretching different muscles and going to try something new. So I'll read anything I think that she puts out. Backlist is different because I'm not a huge sci-fi reader. And her backlist is like a YA sci-fi.
It's a YA. So I haven't read it either because it's YA.
Yeah.
So I usually won't go to a backlist. I'll read a new one that she publishes. This makes sense in my head, but I won't backlist it. It's the same with Brandon Sanderson. The only books I haven't read of his were the ones he wrote as a YA before I became a fan, but I'll read new YA stuff he releases. I don't know. Makes sense in my head.
Yeah, but new stuff I'm down. Without a question.
So Paul put in the chat, it's the last contract of Isako. I don't know if I said it right, but it's the sci-fi book that she's writing. And on Goodreads, it says October 9th, 2025. So we have almost a whole year.
I knew it must be some time since the other book is coming out that she is writing with Shannon Lee, January 9th or something, January 7th. It's January. So
just keep them busy.
It's close. Yeah, she is keeping busy. I do recommend reading Untethered Sky. It's very short. I didn't love it as much as Greenbone, but I thought it was a very interesting exploration, and she's very good at bringing up some interesting questions. So I would recommend that to you guys.
Cool.
For sure.
So the description of the last contract of Isako is a cyberpunk samurai space opera without the space. So I don't know what that means.
Well, just an opera then? Is there
singing?
Well, that'll be perfect for you, Phillip. All the singing you could want.
Yeah.
Well, that's new for Lee. I think we're all going to at least give a try to her sci-fi. I'm sure. Maybe we will come back together to discuss the sci-fi book, and hopefully we'll all have different opinions again. Maybe Jimmy, you won't. Maybe you'll be the one who loves it, and Taylor will be the one who hates it, and then there we are.
I guess I'm still sitting on that fence then.
You're just Phillip. You're on the fence.
Nothing but predictable.
Yeah.
You're the glue. That's all right.
That's right.
Yeah, it holds everything together. Make sure we don't break out into fights.
Yeah.
Because we would. We're also such violent people.
Yes.
In general. Thank you guys for joining me for our very late Jade Legacy chat. Hopefully you guys all still enjoyed it. And now we've inspired us all to, it's been long enough. Now we want to reread the series. So there we go. Except for Jimmy.
Jimmy's face.
Maybe book 1.
You can stop after book 2. And we'll catch you guys all next time. See you later. Bye.
Bye.
Murphy arrived at the very end.